This week on the podcast, we continue to talk about the changes our world is going to see because of AI. Also continue to talk about what Christians need to be thinking about, what they need to be doing. What's our role? What's our financial role? Is there any? What's our role in the morals that are going to be coming about of it? Are we going to have a seat at the table when all these changes are made? So join us as we talk about the future of our world and what AI is going to have to do with it.
All right, so last week we talked about all the people that could lose their jobs, their careers, their livelihoods because of AI. Just because AI is so powerful, it can code, it can graphic design, it can diagnose. So these very successful people who have worked really hard for these careers, like we could see them being replaced by AI. And this causes a lot of fear and a lot of anxiety. How do you think people should handle that and go about that?
Yeah, I think you're right. It is going to cause a lot of anxiety and fear and stuff. And just to like give an example of how that might be, I was just in the car yesterday with some people and we were talking about AI and they didn't know a lot about it. And I was explaining it to them. And I was talking about how I had done all this work to write a PhD dissertation. So I had spent years writing this paper. So it's like a 250-page paper, all this research, all this work and effort, trying to find every source I could about my subject, look at everything that had ever been written that of any academic repute that I could find, to be able to put this together. And it was a ton of work and a lot of effort. And so I have a lot of like pride in that I did it and that I worked really hard. And this gave me some skills that other people don't have. So I'm not consider myself a crazy good writer. I'm not a good writer, but I can do this academic research and write a paper that not very many people in the town I live in can do. I'm sure there are others, but not very many. And so, that's like a big deal. And then I start using ChatGPT and I realize that my paper could be probably written in just a matter of, 10 seconds or whatever. Like it could look at everything I looked at and synthesize it, faster than I could. When I wrote the, multiple chapters on the history of whatever, I mean, of course, it knows all that history and it can put it together better. I'm like digging through, Tertullian, trying to find some quote from him to use in my paper. I mean, it instantly has access to everything Tertullian ever said, could pull a quote, compare it to, Clement's quote to Augustine's or whoever you want to have. And so you realize the skill I have that I worked years for, maybe it doesn't even matter anymore, Yeah. It's like kind of almost useless,
Well, and I think, the saving grace for you and the cool thing for you is that your skill is a lot more than writing papers. Like seminary teaches you how to share God with people, something everybody needs. So you luckily, even if the dissertation becomes irrelevant, you have something that everybody else needs. Whereas some of these people who do dissertations in gender study or psychology, what do they even do after this?
Well, if what they do is write about it later, then it's going to be really tough for them. So, maybe you get a PhD in something different, but, you do real world things that don't involve sitting computer typing in text, maybe they'll be fine. But anybody that sits at a computer and types in text all day, I think that's going to be really tough. And, what I compare it to the people I was with yesterday, because, they're retired, is just imagine how it felt that you worked at a job and you were good at it and people needed you, and then you retired. And then a year later, you walked into that job and realized no one needed you. You weren't useful anymore. The world had passed you by and you were useless. And this normally happens to us when we get older and we retire, because either we physically can't do it because we're not strong enough, we mentally, lose a step and can't do it, or sometimes it's just a pure matter of we don't practice anymore. So we just, we're not putting in the effort, and so we forget how to do it just because, we kind of lose the skill because we're not doing it anymore. But this is weird in that you could be 2 years old, graduate from college, develop a skill of writing, like children's books is an example I've heard a few times. And now it's good,
easy,
great. You can write children's books, easy, no problem. Children's could be written in seconds. Any subject you can think of can be instantly done. you don't have a skill anymore, possibly, or you have to be so elite that you are the best at putting in the right prompts into GPT to write the best children's books. So there will be people that do that, but 5% of the people that write children's book now can do that, or 2%. I mean, it's going to be amazing. So this is going to be painful. And I was mentioning to you offline, like, it's easy just to say, well, my identity is in Christ or whatever, and pretend like it's not going to bother us and whatnot. But I think it's going to be horrible. I think it's going to be super painful. And this used to happen to people that did physical labor jobs, and we would replace them. The famous example of the Luddites, when they were like making clothing and they had machines that replaced them, they were obviously not happy about that. It was the money, it was the job, sure, but also their skill was kind of useless anymore, and that had to really hurt in a way that wasn't just their pocketbooks.
Right. So that brings up another point, which is like humans. Like, naturally, we rely on money because money is the source of more than just material things. It can become the source of security and safety. How do you think, where should people go after this, like for their security? What can they turn to? What can they do?
Well, I obviously probably am not an expert on like how to change your career or what job you should get next necessarily, but I would say it's going to be odd. And like, are we going to have to think about our relationship to sort of, I don't know, whatever you want to call it, government handouts or something that a lot of times we have a real aversion to, right? So for a lot of people, if they lose their job, taking something like, unemployment can be like bad because you think of yourself as lazy or something. You're lazy. Why do you have to take this unemployment? You living off the government and how terrible that is. And, I think that's like in general, an attitude I've sort of had and think it's a good attitude to have, right? Like, I don't want to rely on the government to, be my source of income. I want to do it myself. And if you've ever met someone like who's maybe disabled or whatever, and it's on government services because they can't work, yet they kind of act like they can't believe, no, this person won't do something for them, right? Like, how come, my social worker isn't on the ball? And it's like, well, I mean, the rest of us don't have a social worker, yet you're picked that your social worker isn't doing enough for you. That can be frustrating to those of us who say to ourselves, I don't need that. I can do it myself. And what if you can't do it yourself? What if, how is that? That's going to be hard, right? Like, are we going to have to think about that? And, I don't know. Maybe not. Maybe we'll be able to transition and there'll be other jobs to get and it'll all be fine, but it might be very tough. And if the government has to step in and help find us a way to transition all these people that are going to lose their jobs to go to another one, how do we feel about that? Is that like, okay? Is it something Christians should morally say we shouldn't ever take that money or take those offers, or how should we feel about that?
So there are new degrees in Christian social work. And I was actually talking to one of my friends about this because she got one from Oral Roberts. And actually hers is just in social work, but the reason why she got that is because she feels like there's a gap with social work within the church. And she believes that social work should be done within the church, that sort of these non-for-profit organizations should be the one giving handouts to people and like really ministering to people. Do you think that is something that the church should maybe focus more on?
I remember having a debate with my dad about this one time years ago. He probably doesn't even remember. And just like, I was kind of making the argument that the church should be doing more of this. And he would just say like, well, Joel, you don't understand the numbers. So let's just say someone makes $100,000 a year and they lose their job, but they still have their house payment.
Right.
How many churches could afford to even make that person's house payment, much less all their other food? And I mean, I look at the finances of our church. How many people could our church of 100 actually afford to be able to keep people propped up financially? And the answer is like hardly any. So if like two people with good jobs in our church lost their jobs, we are we suggesting we're going to be able to keep them afloat? We're going to make their car payment, we're going to make their house payment, we're going to buy, we're going to pay for their phone. The numbers are just so big.
Right. And I think there's a lot more to that. For instance, the stats show that only 1.7% of Christians pay their tithe. So, like, of course, the church can't support everyone when only 1.7% is paying their tithe. But then also there's the aspect of like one church couldn't try to help all of America, but if it helped its members with inside the church. So that's another question. Like, should we just be focusing on the members of the church who are suffering, or should we be focusing on like the whole city of Paola or the whole state of Kansas? Like, there would have to be a process. What do you think about that?
So we certainly would want to help our members internally and whatnot. We want to be for them and care for them the best we can. But if 3 high-paying jobs got lost, it would bankrupt the church to try to float them. So when we say, how are we going to help them? I'm not optimistic that most churches could even afford to float their own people. And if you say, well, we should just get people to tithe more, and you weren't saying that, but let's just say someone said, let's just get people to tithe more. I guess if we could get people to tithe more, we'd already be doing that.
Right.
I don't know how to. If someone has a trick on how to make that happen, let me know. Yeah.
Force. No, I'm kidding. I think that there's like, so the thing is though, and I totally get what you're saying about like we couldn't make their house payments, we couldn't make that, and you're right. However, us being the body of church, I mean, if things really do get this bad, like we're talking about catastrophic, unnormal events, do you think that members of the church should be doing more than just paying people's bills, as far as like, oh, like you don't have a place to stay, come stay with me? Or like, oh, like you kind of spearheading it and almost being a social worker kind of ourselves and taking in like the members of the church and our friends.
So if we get in a situation where it's like fairly catastrophic, meaning like it's just tons of unemployment, lots of people can't make their bills, and these are perfectly they would happy have a job and whatever, and they lose their house or whatever, of course I would say the church needs to be able to step in. Because if you talk about real tragedy, like people are losing their house, living on the streets, absolutely we need to do things like taking each other in, and like a big portion of people that have a spare bedroom should absolutely have that thing filled and maybe their living room filled, and we totally should be able to fill that gap. And ironically, we might actually be better at helping people in catastrophic situations more than we would in less catastrophic situations. Like if things were so bad they had nowhere to live but under a bridge, we could probably help them. If their problem is just, well, I'm going to lose my house, we probably can't do a lot about that,
So I'm going to ask kind of a hard question. So you're the pastor, right? You had this congregation. I want to know from your perspective, if something happened, do you think the people in your congregation would help? Do you think that they're in a place with their relationship with God where if something happened, they would kind of be unselfish and take people in and nurture them and, try to be that body of Christ? Or do you think we're at a place where we're Christians, but we're consumed with ourselves and our families?
I think if there were really a catastrophic situation where really people from our church were like didn't have anywhere to go, I totally am optimistic that we would step up to the plate. I think if the problems were clear, if we knew how to help people, I think we would. I'm totally optimistic that people would step up and help. Sometimes I think where the church has trouble is the in-between places. Like, how do you help? What do you do? Because I don't know if you've ever been in a situation you're sort of down on your luck, but the thing you almost always need isn't a place stay. Maybe you do, but usually you just need money. That's like
Right.
usually the thing to kind of get you through. And the church is not, just doesn't have a whole bunch of money to be handing out. So if we get to a place where people are so in trouble that we can do things that aren't just money, like stay at our houses, I think we would definitely step up and help people. And so I am optimistic we would do a good job there, or try, or put our best foot forward, or whatnot. I think if it's just in more of an in between place, I think the church's place is a little bit harder, which is why, ironically, I maybe went straight to the emotional side, because I think we can actually help with that more in a more in between place where people need more, where there's just situations where if they're financially on their luck, we can't, just give them a bunch of money. The emotional side might be the place that we do the provide them comfort and friendship, because obviously, hundreds of years ago, people had nothing and were happy. There were people that were happy and they had nothing. So we can have nothing and be happy, but it's going to be really hard. It's going to be painful. And some of these people that are going to lose their jobs are going to be the high paying jobs. So, I was always like, well, the McDonald's workers are going to get replaced. Okay, well, that's whatever they pay now, $15 an hour. I don't know what they pay now job. Well, you can kind of go get another one. But we're talking about people that make, $250,000 a year losing their jobs,
Yeah.
and no one wanting them anymore. Like, that's going to be brutal for them in emotional sense. And you could say, oh yeah, but 200 years ago, we were all getting up and, subsistence farming, what's your problem? I mean, that's easy to say, but that's going to be tough.
Well, if they're generous people, and they're using their money to influence other things, it is going to be difficult, because sometimes those people with higher paying jobs, like you said, if they're congregations of your church and they stop paying tithe or stop their generous offerings, then that affects a lot of people, even overseas, even our missionaries.
Yes. So if you're a church, especially, I don't think this would affect our church as much, but if you had a lot of people in your church that were in the tech sector and just a big portion of them lose their jobs all at once, you say, well, the church can help them. Well, the church is going to be going broke at that point. So unless we're in a catastrophic state where we need to basically house people in the building, which, churches have done during, hurricanes and whatnot, unless we're at that state, the church is also going to be broke. Because we're all going to be broke together.
So, Christian social work. Do you think it would be helpful for churches to have a person that kind of has these resources of like resume writing, job rerouting, places to go if you do need a temporary stay? Like, obviously, we can't just hand out money, especially if we are running out of money ourselves. But do you think somebody in the church who is basically like a private social worker, do you think churches should be adopting that?
Maybe if your church had enough resources that hiring someone like that, or you're just fortunate enough you have someone in your church that has those skills and a lot of time, which is a tough combination to find, that would be a great ministry for a church to have. But it's going to be tough for a church to do. And I tend to think, and maybe I'm wrong about this, but I've sort of become more focused on the church where what we're best at is the spiritual part and teaching the Bible, and that we're not actually that good at being financial people. Like, we're not actually super good at that. That's not even our call in ministry, is to do that kind of stuff, to figure out, be expert economist or something like that. That's probably not what we're best at. So if you're talking about a church that can't afford to hire another staff member, or doesn't happen to have a volunteer to do it, I'm not sure that should be a huge priority. What should be a huge priority is that when these people are going through this horrible time, when they go to church, they better have their friends care about them. And though their friends may not be able to make their house payment for them, they should receive some serious love and empathy and hugs and whatever, because as we go through some of this pain, we should be able to adjust from making a lot of money to not making a lot of money. It will be painful. And what will get us through that pain is our church should be, a big part of it should be our church family. Our church family should be helping us get through that suffering, because while losing the money is going to hurt, it's going to hurt really bad. And what do you want when you're hurting really bad? Well, I guess the money would be nice, but if we don't have that, what do you want when you're hurting really bad, right? No one wants to be sick home and alone and have nobody care about them. Even if your friend or your spouse comes over and does something for you that doesn't really help, just knowing that somebody cares about you is great, right? It's like when you get visited in the hospital, sometimes that can be so meaningful, even though all the person does is come and do almost nothing. Just having people care about you is so important. And that part, if nothing else, the church better hit some home runs in that department.
Yeah. Maybe I'm a pessimist, but if everybody loses their job, right? Like maybe not everybody, let's say 80% or even 50. I don't see it going that well. I think everybody's going to be consumed with their own misfortune, that I don't think it will be super comforting, If
80% lose their job, I mean, that would bring the whole economy down an absolute grind. I mean, I'm not even sure I could fathom how bad that would be. I don't think that will happen that fast. If it does, that's going to be brutal. That is going to be absolute. If it does, what will happen is people will look to the government to do something about it, because the economy will have ground to an absolute halt, and we'll probably get something like the government will provide people jobs of digging a ditch and filling it up, or whatever, and
kind of like the Great Depression solution.
Like the Great Depression. Yeah. And whether, we could, I'm not a policy expert, and which of those are good or not, I'm not 100% sure, but it'd probably be better if the government just let us all dig a ditch and fill it up and paid us for it. And then you have to tax through the nose the companies making all the money. I mean, there was a New York Times article where they interviewed the head of AI. He goes, what is what we have worth? What is what we have worth? What is AI? How much money is AI going to make us? And he I don't know, 100 trillion? Like the amount of, he obviously is just making up numbers. He has no idea, but he's thinking it's worth an incredible amount. So he's already thinking about how he's going to give it away. We're going to have to give it away because we're going to be crushing jobs like crazy. So how are we going to give it away? And then he said, well, maybe the way I'll give it away is by having an AI tell me what the best way to give it away is. And to me, I'm I'm not really sure having somebody, that owns a company and trusting in their benevolence to give it away in a great way is a good idea,
Right.
I don't think that's a good idea.
So, you make a really great point, which is a little bit off topic, but I think it's worth bringing up. If this thing is worth, let's say, $100 trillion, we've never had an 100 trillionaire before. Does
Standard Oil would be the closest thing, right?
Yeah. Does this person automatically become a powerful political figure? This person can kind of just do whatever they want now.
The only thing that can stop them is what in these conversations, I refer to as the guns, meaning unless there is, the only thing more powerful than them is the guns. And so that's the government, right? They can throw you in jail. And if you don't do what they say, you don't pay your fine. Eventually they can send someone with a gun to your house. Right. So the only thing more powerful than the rich people are them.
Sorry, my bad. Sorry.
If you have enough money, what?
So if you have enough money, though, can you put the government in your pocket?
Yeah, you can. Well, probably. I mean, the way our system works now is when the Supreme Court decided that donated campaigns was free speech, companies already give as much money as they want to government people. So you could kind of argue that they already sort of do that to a degree, and we probably don't want to go too far down that rabbit hole. But of course, the people that have that much money, if they are allowed to give unlimited amounts of money to any campaign they want, and they can just make it so that, they would have an insane amount, incredible amount of power. I mean, so when we broke up Standard Oil, I would say this was like an incredible victory for U.S. government. Like, I mean, if you had one company that controlled all the oil today, like they would be so powerful, right? They could just turn off the tap
Right.
anytime you wanted, and most people could, almost nobody could drive their cars. So, I mean, I don't see another way other than hoping that the government can't be influenced by this company, meaning they don't get paid by them. And then you have to bring out the guns. I'm not saying the government would actually have to bring guns to that company, but they would have to tax them, through the nose in order to pay for for the rest of us to dig holes and fill them up. And I'm sure they could find more meaningful work than that. You could build, we could literally have people that we pay to just go clean up the streets. And just like we'd have the most beautifully manicured, towns in the world because we all have time to do it. And it could be great. It could be good. It could be amazing that we do it. I don't know, but it is an interesting problem that we're going to, if they are powerful enough, we are going to have to be able to handle that in some way.
So this brings up an ethics question. Do you think it is ethical or biblical for a organization like the government to be able to go and take something that somebody has created and okay, so you create this thing, you put your time, your effort, nobody else can do it. You're the only one who can create it. You create it, the law of supply and demand, everybody wants it. You've done nothing wrong. They're willing to pay for it, not because you're manipulating them, but because they have a service that you want. Is it ethical for the government to be able to come and take that from you and tell you how you're allowed to use it and how you're not allowed to use it?
So if you think about governments in the Bible, you have the old, think about the Old Testament. When they built the temple, they would tax people. So the Old Testament, they absolutely taxed people. They had, David did not get his food because he was out there farming himself. He was taxing the people of Israel in order to get his stuff. So absolutely, there's taxes happening in the Old Testament. And then in the New Testament, when the Bible doesn't really say a ton about the government directly, like you are talking about, I mean, the amount of interpretations I've heard on give unto Caesar's what is Caesar's is just, I mean, it is incredibly difficult to know. And to build a whole entire governmental economic system based on that phrase is probably a little shaky, right? So therefore, I would say that our governmental systems are a bit up to us. We can decide. Now, I think they should be on biblical principles. And I'm even willing to say you could probably have a biblical-based system that's a parliamentary or democracy, or maybe there's some other ones that aren't really violating biblical principles. Because you could say, well, it's wrong to have anything but a democracy or a republic or whatever. But it's like, dude, the Old Testament didn't have a democracy. I mean, they did not. And I'd rather have a democracy. I think it's better. But I'm not sure it's a God-given thing that every country has to be a democracy, or why were they not allowed to have one in the Old Testament?
So as humans, even if we're not religious, we all sort of have a natural law, right? If there's two atheists and one promises to do something, usually the other one, if they don't follow through on their deal, is upset about it. Like we all kind of have like this human natural law. And we have these morals and values. However, now we have this machine that we don't really know if it has morals and values. Like you mentioned last time about it lying to get through the CAPTCHA. Not because the machine is a sinner, but because like the machine is sort of a pragmatist. It has a means to an end. So how do we go from being a people that have values and morals to kind of relying on this machine that doesn't have values and morals? And how do we handle that fear?
Mm-hmm. Well, we figure out what happened to I have a kitten.
Oh.
It didn't turn back on, did it?
Yeah, it's back on now.
Okay, we're going to stare at the thing for a second. Yeah, that's a good question. I would say that if AI is a tool and doesn't go killing everybody or anything like that, and it just becomes this really powerful tool, I think relying on it to do a lot of cool stuff is fine. We rely on the internet to do a lot of neat stuff. We rely on, big machinery to farm our crops and cars to drive us places. And if AI is just another tool, I think it's great and we should totally rely on it. But you make a really good point regarding relying on it for morals. And I actually think this is a big reason why I wanted to start this podcast, is because Christians should be interested in the moral aspects of it. And therefore, I think humans need to be staying in the loop on morals. Because if the AI just reads the whole internet, and maybe AI will have a great idea on how to help poor people, that might be fine. Or it might have a really great idea on how to have some sort of policy about something. But it doesn't care whether it's right or wrong. Like you said, you're right. It doesn't know about right and wrong. It doesn't. Why would it? And I'm not sure we can train it to be right and wrong. It just reads the whole internet, right? It's not like someone sits there and codes, this is right and this is wrong and this is right and this is. That's not how they build the models. So because they can't really code right and wrong, I think we need to be careful about relying on this AI to decide what's right and wrong.
Do you think that this could cause a huge problem for even Christians who maybe don't read their Bible all the time and they aren't in tune with their morals? Like if they open their computer and AI says this, and they know that AI has all the information, not only do they know that AI has all the information, but everywhere is going to be encouraging AI, probably, right? Like you'll probably turn on your TV and they'll be talking about how smart and intelligent and how it is science. It is, it is the truth. Do you think that Christians could be deceived and relying on technology as the truth?
Yeah, I mean, relying on it to be the best Wikipedia page ever is probably like a good idea. Relying on it to decide what's right and wrong is an issue. And can I imagine a scenario in which Christians and other people just fall into trusting it for the right and wrong? I guess that's possible. We would have to get to where we trusted it quite a bit, and that may be possible. If it's just so good at things and we just kind of lean on it, we might get to that point. And that could be an issue. That could be an issue. I think that when you have a powerful tool, and we're assuming it's just a tool in this discussion, you have to have morals in the way that you use that tool. And we want to be really careful about making sure we have those. And I actually think this is another really important thing about Christianity. Maybe even as important as what I was talking about earlier with, providing empathy and being there for each other if we lose our jobs. We should be discussing the right and wrongness of things. I kind of think that if you have a really good morals, when you go into different kind of situations, you should be helpful in knowing what's right and wrong, right? You should be like a valuable person. You should be, providing a lot of benefit because you do what's right. And we want people involved in AI and these discussions in AI who care about what's doing what's right. Because if we have the number one care being making the most money possible, I just think it could be really tough. It could be really tough.
Yeah.
And then, so, I know slavery is probably overly used and maybe I shouldn't reference it too often, but what was the best way to make money? Enslave a bunch of people and have them do all your work for free. That's a great way to make money. I mean, if that's the goal and that's all you care about is making money, then we should go find some people and go enslave them and have them do a bunch of work for us. It's great. But we don't just want to make the most money possible. We also want to do what's right. And we as Christians need to be interacting, involved with this situation because we do need to care about what's doing right. And, it's interesting. If you follow the AI community, they have done a lot of thinking about stuff. They have thought deeply about what this is going to do. And I appreciate that they have done that. And in some ways, I've been pleasantly surprised at how hard they've thought about it. But I also am concerned that maybe there's no Christian influence in that. These are just guys trying to, work. There's some girls, but usually they're guys, but there are girls too. They are just working really hard to, invent the next cool thing. And we all wish we could invent the next cool thing.
Yeah. I mean, that to me is kind of scary, that people who are not religious, they are secular people who can also be like very nice, kind people. I'm not saying they are outrageously evil and like don't have morals, but like, is that alarming that this decision is in their hands without Christian influence?
That is a concern. I'm just saying that Christians, we need to be talking about, we need to care about, we need to, be letting our voice known in it. And I think we need to be a bit careful on pretending how much we know. We are not AI experts. We are not writing language models. So telling them how they should or shouldn't do it, we need to have some humility. But the part we need to be saying, hey, this is the part we know and care about, is the moral aspects to it. So there are some moral questions to be considered if one company gets super rich, and we need to think deeply about what those moral aspects are. We need to think deeply about what you said regarding people become overly relying on it to make their decisions, moral decisions, right or wrong. I mean, if I type into it, do I get a divorce? And it says, well, what's the situation? And you type in the situation, so on and so forth. The AI doesn't care whether you get divorced or not. So it's
Right.
just probably maybe that's not a question that's great for AI. Maybe AI is fine to ask for marriage tips or something like that. You can list some, and you can decide whether you want to use them or not. It's a fine tool, but it does not have morals, and so it's not going to care whether you get divorced or not. It is not going to care whether you please God with your life or not. That is not an issue for it.
So I think on the bright side, what you're saying is like there are still a lot of areas in life where we do need humans. Like this, like if you need advice on morals and ethics, like the internet, AI is not really the place to go. Like there are still a ton of scenarios where like counselors, biblical counselors, social workers, people like that, they might actually see an increase in their jobs, perhaps, maybe.
Maybe, but certainly we shouldn't just let the secular people have this as far as not putting our voices forward. We can let them have it as far as we're really, they made it and good for them. And maybe they're Christians, maybe they're not. I've not gotten the impression that they are, and we can laud them for it. We appreciate all their hard work, but we should be talking about the morals, and we should be involved in that. And we should be doing it in a very thoughtful way. And we got to be really careful not to just pick teams and then be on a team and then yell. And, this is new. This is going to be hard. Our previous thought patterns on how we did with some political issue is not necessarily going to be able to guide us through this. We need to be thinking about it deeply. And in the Christian community right now that I'm aware of, we're one of the only ones talking about it hardly at all. I mean, I'm sure we're not the only ones, but I don't know of another one to go listen to talk about it, interact with. And I'd actually love to have some other Christian leaders on with us to talk about what they're thinking about it, because I think Christianity needs to be a part of the discussion on the morals.
How do we do that? How do we make our voices heard? Like, who needs to do that? Do like the top pastors in the world need to like make a committee and then go to AI and ask if they can help? Does it need to be a more grassroots activism? How does the church, the body of Christ, do that?
So I think you're right that maybe ultimately church leaders need to be involved, but without the interest of the grassroots, I'm not sure you're going to make the church leaders be interested. So if the people, that these people are ministering to don't care, ultimately it's well, at least our church is more of a bottom-up organization, right? Like if the people don't want to do something at our church, I tend, I don't do it. If it's not a, unless, it's a moral thing that I know is right and wrong. In general, I don't do it if they don't want to. So I'd say it has to be a grassroots thing where the people care about it and they want to be involved in it. And then, of course, you can't be represented by, 20,000 people can't go to the meeting. So you will have people, Christians representatives, and maybe that does form into a committee of church leaders who ended up talking about this, discussing it and what needs to go on. And, I think that would be absolutely fantastic. I would love to see if there were enough interest from the Christian community and enough of a groundswell that when whatever company is sitting down talking about AI, maybe we could, get a representative. Now we got to be really careful. We got to be humble. There's a lot of parts of that meeting we are not experts in, right? We are only the experts in what we are part of. And I don't want to run around, pretend, being a jerk, but I totally think we should be trying to be interested in it and, consider moral questions. Hopefully Christians, we as Christian people, we go to seminary and so forth. We've been thinking deeply about moral issues. And of course we want to help shape that. I think that we were a big part of shaping, the Constitution and rules for our country. And I'm sure some of those aren't perfect, but hopefully we, tried to do well. And we've come out with a pretty good country because of it. And hopefully this next big shift in AI, that will also be a big part of it. A tale of caution would be the companies that built algorithms to maximize engagement on social media, YouTube or whatever. They've been bad for society, probably. I think pretty much everyone agrees at this point that they've been bad. And what's funny about that wasn't, I don't know if it's funny, but I don't think YouTube or whoever was sitting there saying, we should do something bad for society and we don't care. We're going to make money anyway. That wasn't the order. It was, we want to make money. Yeah. And that's it. We want to make money. And the morals weren't, that wasn't the number one thought on their mind.
You're absolutely right. And the other part of that is they probably had different morals too. Like probably by shadow banning some people and some groups and by causing the algorithms to display more and shut down other people, they thought that what they were doing was helping society. Like in their eyes, that was probably completely ethical. So that's another great point. In a world where truth has so relative and you can believe what you want to believe and I'm going to believe what I want to believe and it won't affect anybody. Like we can go on. Are we seeing that probably doesn't actually work? Like that's not actually true? Is there an absolute truth that people have to agree with in order to move forward?
Or even just something like, history, Christianity has a ton of baggage, right? We've done lots of bad stuff, the Crusades or whatever. So it's just not that hard of a jump to see that the AI would say, well, in Christianity in general hasn't been that beneficial or whatever. And maybe some of the people on that committee, so it just seems like we should say, not pretend we didn't do any bad, Christianity hasn't ever done bad stuff, but we want to be putting our best foot forward and have a seat at the table as far as talking the moral seat at the table. There'll be lots of tables and we don't need to be at all of them because we don't know about lots of them, but I think we do need to be at the seat at the table on the moral discussions. And if I were a part of the Jewish community, I'd be saying, hey, we'd like to have our input too. If I were them, I'd be saying whatnot. And so I don't just want this moment to pass us by. I mean, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe we'll look at this podcast in 10 years and go, that ended up not being that big a deal, but I doubt it. I think this is going to end up being a big deal.
So, hold on. I lost my train of thought. Sorry. Is this going where you wanted it to go? Like, is this working or not really?
Yeah, I think it's going fine. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because free throwing is fine. So I think a theme is good, but we don't want to ever lock ourselves into a theme. The theme and the questions you have are just like we're running out of things to say. As a matter of fact, if Ron wouldn't have interrupted us, I'm guessing we would have just continued on with the government stuff. Right. The problem was once I broke thought, I couldn't remember what I had said and couldn't say. So I had to change subjects because I got lost.
Yeah. You're good. So we were just talking, I had like a great question and then it just like slipped. We were talking about seat at the tables, Oh, okay. Pause, look at the camera. I got this. All right. So I think the next question is, let's say we do get a moral seat at this table, but our morals make them make less money. Like doing immoral things would actually give them the opportunity to make more money. Who then steps in to make them listen? Like, are we in a world now where there's like mob rule and protest and riots, or will the ultimate United Nations have to step in, or what do we think would happen then?
If we tried to, get a seat at the table and suggest certain things are, moral and immoral, and they wouldn't listen and they just got on their own way. I don't know what would happen. Do you lobby your government at that point? You just, try to get one of the political parties to do what you want or what? I'm not sure. I think that stuff's really hard to extrapolate out. I mean, obviously, if they're going to do really immoral things, at some point, you do protest or whatnot. I mean, if something's bad enough, you do protest. And it actually is confusing to me when you should and you shouldn't. Like, I think it's probably true that the current algorithms on social media cause especially teenage girls to commit suicide more likely than they would otherwise. Should I be on the street protesting that? Maybe I should. I'm not sure. I don't know, but certainly if it got bad enough, of course we should. I mean, I hope we don't have to get to that point, but we may have to get to where we are at that point. But I'm hoping, as a society, we can, do things peacefully. And as far as the Christian side of it, I don't want to resort to a more abrasive, violent version until it's the absolute last resort, and you've tried absolutely everything you possibly could before that. That's how I would try to handle it. I'm not going to start burning the servers down quite yet. I mean, maybe at some point you convince me that that's a good idea, but I don't think that's the direction I'd want to start with. I don't know if that was clear. I find the direction confusing. What do you think? I mean, how do you see the future playing out? I mean, it's such a hard thing to see.
Yeah. I think that if the creators of AI are not following a moral code, if they're not religious, if they're just kind of secular, atheist, agnostic, I think they're going to be driven to do whatever makes them the most money. Because I think that people are inherently evil and selfish and prideful. So if they get this technology and there's not rules for them put in place, I think they will use it to their gain and that they won't stop at any cost. Thankfully, I don't think they will want the end of civilization approach, because that doesn't really benefit them. But I think as far as it being in their hands, I think they will manipulate the situations to whatever makes them the most money. Because after money, the next step is power.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, and if you're lucky, sometimes what makes people the most money benefits everybody, and it's fine. Sometimes those things come together, but they do not always come together. Slavery always being my favorite example. So I love it when you provide us the idea of you provide a service, everybody wants a service, and you get rich, and therefore the better you provide the service, and the better product that you create, the more money you make, and so therefore you're always helping people with the products that you create, and that's like a sort of romantic, wonderful thing, and it does work sometimes, or maybe a lot of times, I don't know, but it doesn't work all the time, and when it doesn't, you have to have some sort of guardrails in place. And I think Christians should be a part of the morals of this. Go ahead.
I think the scary thing is that in the slavery example, it was kind of like the lay people were doing this thing, and some of the politicians were too. So the government was able to kind of make a rule for the citizens, whereas this is somebody where if they make so much money and they are so powerful, I'm not sure anybody could step in and stop them. because these people could just they could just eliminate them. Like, oh, the government wants to tell me what to do. There goes your currency. You can't print anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Or the Pentagon is now shut down. Like, I think I don't know. It just seems much scarier.
I mean, if they're powerful enough to, like, stop the military from doing whatever, or, the police or whoever, then yeah, that would be crazy powerful. I mean, and if you think about the Civil War, what stopped us from having slavery? We told them don't have it. And they said states' rights. Our states should be the right to have slavery or not. And they said, well, we think this is such a big moral issue. We don't care. We think it's bigger than states' rights. And we're not even going to let you break away from our country. And so we had a war about it. And so, it's a place of optimism that we ended this immoral thing and we're willing to fight a war over it. But it's true that if AI gets too powerful, the people with the guns won't win the war. And I bet it won't be like a war. I bet the bad scenario is more like they just are kind of in the background running everything, sort of, or just not running everything. They're not like in a smoke-filled room. It's just they have just so much influence that when they want something, they get it. Right. And there'll be lots of things they won't want that they don't care about. But if it's something they care about, they'll get to decide. And that is concerning.
So that brings a really good point. Like, do you think we would ever have a fair election again if this person or this group up at the top has global access, not just national? Like, we're not just talking about like an American voting fraud, like everywhere. And let's say they wanted a certain group of people all in at the same time. Do you think that we would ever be able to have like a fair election?
You could have one. The problem is whether people trust it or not,
Yeah.
So having it is one thing. Having people believe that you had one is a separate. Those are actually separate issues, and you have to have both.
Right.
Right. And so if you really do, so even if the people from whoever invents the AI go, we don't care who gets elected the president of Zimbabwe, we don't care. But the Zimbabwe guy that loses say, listen, they changed the votes, and they could be right that they could change the votes, but whether they did or not, might not actually matter, I don't know,
I don't know if the AI people could come out and actually prove. I don't know if there would be a solid way to show that they didn't, because
if they just could, it would be really hard to. How do they prove that they didn't? It's really tricky. I mean, it is really, really tricky. If they had the power to do, I mean, you could go to all manual ballot counting or whatever, but that would cost a crazy amount of money to do that. People aren't even very good at counting.
On the bright side, on a global scale, do you see AI helping underdeveloped countries that are still pretty third world? Do you see it being able to help them start businesses? Like, so for example, you take maybe a society that's more poor, and now they have access to graphic design, coding, like all at their fingertips for however much a month. Do you think that it will cause lower income areas to flourish?
So if we don't have the Skynet situation, I think that in the long term, it will help the world for sure. I would argue. Now, in the short term, maybe it's rough. Maybe the rich get richer in those countries. Maybe the powerful get even more powerful. Income inequality seems to have increased in America, but everyone's life is also better in America. So is the fact that we've created a bunch more wealth and such overall, we all have iPhones and cool stuff. Probably things have gotten a lot better, even though there's been some negatives too. So would there be some negatives in some of those poor countries that have AI? Maybe. But you know what? If it just makes a phone half as much and those people all need to buy a phone, then their life's going to be better in that sense. if you can have the AI help you design a car that costs 25% less, and so you can sell those people a car that costs 25% less, and it's hard for them to get a car. Yeah, it's going to help them a ton. As a matter of fact, for some of those people that have a huge problem with the lack of education, if you just supercharge all your educated people that are now just super, super good at their jobs because they have this incredibly powerful tool, and the people that weren't as educated are supercharged, and now they're just as good as an educated person in some other country used to be, then boom, they could take a huge leap. I mean, if used well, it could really, really help them. I mean, the bad part would be, the powerful people control it. They don't let everyone else have it. They use it as a tool. I mean, there's ways that it could be used badly, I guess, but I'm kind of, I'm hoping that in the long term it'll work out.
I think that it will really help healthcare too, because you won't need a doctor like on the spot. Like, you don't have to get a specialist from England or France or America. Like, it'll just have the diagnosis. Now, finding a surgeon might be a little bit harder, but I think it would help a lot.
I mean, I probably am talking ignorant because I'm not that kind of doctor, but when you go see your doctor and they talk to you for 15 minutes and they read your thing and they look at your numbers from your tests and they talk to you for a little while, I realize you are paying them. Yeah, they're on a schedule and they're done in 15 minutes. They got to see the next person. They're not going to look at if your shoulder hurts. They're not also going to look at your knee. That's a separate appointment.
Right. Right.
So that you are paying them a lot of money, probably too much, but you're paying them a lot of money because they know stuff that you don't. And it's your health. And so you're not going to take any risks. So you're going to want to talk to the person that's most likely has the best chance to be right. So you're paying them a lot of money, not because walking from room to room every 15 minutes and talking to people is hard. It's because they know stuff that you don't know. Hopefully, they know lots of stuff that you don't know. But if a computer suddenly knows all the stuff that you don't know, it's going to massively change healthcare. And I think to the better. I mean, it will be bad for doctors because the doctor that's not really exceptional, that does nothing more than just go, I listen to your symptoms. I remember what that probably is. I tell you. And if I don't know, I go Google it or look it up in a book. And then I tell you, that person's worthless. Like, the AI is going to be better at that. Right. Doctors already use Dr. Google and they can read Dr. Google way better than you or I can. So I'm not saying even that isn't providing no value, because they can go read an article quicker and faster, and the lingo, they understand the lingo in a way that is kind of, I don't know how many medical journals you tried to read, but they're hard to trudge through, really hard for me to trudge through. But an AI can do it in no problem better. So I think it'll be great. And for underdeveloped countries that have no doctor, if they could walk in and say, I live in this country, I'm this years old, I weigh this much, here's my symptoms, here's my family history. They literally could just type it in a keyboard, and that thing gives them a really good diagnosis. I mean, are you kidding? You could have a bunch of noobs that all they know how to do is give people a shot, and the AI tells them what shot to give them, and you go for it. And is the AI going to kill a few people? Sure, but doctors are killing people right and left already, right? Doctors make tons of mistakes.
Yes.
And accidentally
they call it a practice.
Killed. Yeah. Yeah. All right. So you're right. I hadn't thought about that within poor countries as deeply maybe as you had. That could be an incredibly huge benefit. I mean, missionaries, whatnot, going to other countries, it's like every mission organization in the world wants the doctor to become a missionary because it's an instant way to help people and then be able to give them the gospel or whatnot. I mean, if you can come and as long as you're allowed to administer the medicines and you let the AI do the diagnosing, that could just supercharge those ministries.
That would be cool. Yeah, I think it's really interesting. I think as scared and nervous as we are about some of the bad things that could arise from AI, I think on a global scale, there might be some really cool things that could emerge from it if the people choose to use it right. We talked about a lot. We covered a lot. There's still a ton to cover. So thanks for, talking with me this week. And I think we'll catch back up next week.